November 1941, the northernmost of the main Japanese islands. Six Japanese aircraft carriers are being brought to full strength. Japan is going to war against the United States of America and the British Empire. Japan is going to war because she's been unable to find any other way to relieve the economic sanctions which the United States has placed against her. For the oil of the Dutch East Indies, for the rubber of Sumatra and Burma, for the tin of Borneo, and above all, for a free hand in the conquest of China, Japan is going to war. France and Holland have fallen. England is all but defeated. Russia has been invaded by the Germans. All the restraining powers, but one, are incapable of stopping Japan's expansion. The Japanese fleet is steaming to the Hawaiian Islands, to the island of Oahu, Pearl Harbor. Its mission is to destroy the United States Pacific Fleet by surprise attack. We shall now bow to the Imperial Palace. Salute. Message received in code at Pearl Harbor from Chief of Naval Operations, Washington, D.C., to Commander, United States Pacific Fleet. This dispatch is to be considered a war warning. Diplomatic negotiations with Japan have ceased, and an aggressive move by Japan is expected in the next few days. Execute appropriate defensive maneuvers. November 26, 1941. Message received in code at Pearl Harbor. From Chief of Army War Plans to American Army Commander, Oahu. Negotiations with Japan seem to be terminated. Japanese hostile action possible at any moment. Subversive activities may be expected. Japanese secret message intercepted and later decoded in Washington. From Japanese Foreign Office, Tokyo, to Japanese Consulate, Hawaii. Strictly secret. Please investigate comprehensively the American fleet bases in the neighborhood of the Hawaiian Military Reservation. The American Navy reports that it has lost track of Japanese aircraft carrier Divisions 1 and 2. American intelligence assumes aircraft carriers are on late fall maneuvers in home waters. Message received from Admiral Yamamoto in Japan. Quote, climb Mount Niitaka, end quote. Its meaning, proceed with attack. December 5th, message received in Honolulu by the Japanese consulate. Quote, we have been receiving reports from you on American ship movements. In the future, please report even when there are no American movements, end quote. Message intercepted and decoded in Washington. December 6th, position of the Japanese strike force, 600 miles north of Pearl Harbor. The toast is drunk in all wardroom and messes, the Emperor. Each of the attacking airplanes carries in its cockpit a small amulet from a Shinto shrine. The planes are dedicated with sake. Midnight, December 6th, Pearl Harbor. The American military receives a report that the Japanese consulate is burning papers under the cover of night. No steps are taken. The alert status of the United States Pacific Fleet, early Sunday morning, 7 December 1941. Almost all the American fleet, excluding the aircraft carriers, is moored at Pearl Harbor. But no American anti-aircraft balloons are flying, no torpedo baffles are set. There is no reconnaissance screen, no offshore patrols. 50% of the American sailors are on shore. 0600 hours, December 7th. The Japanese strike force is 200 miles north of Pearl Harbor. The carriers are brought to full speed. The ships are turned 20 degrees to starboard in order to launch the planes directly into the wind. The strength of the Japanese attack force: 135 dive bombers, 40 torpedo bombers, 104 high-level bombers, 81 fighter escorts. Double-check their navigation, the Japanese flyers tune in the American radio station on Oahu. The American station unwittingly serves as a radio beacon guiding the Japanese attackers towards Pearl Harbor. 0700 hours. The anti-torpedo net protecting the American fleet at Pearl Harbor has unexplainedly been left open. 0712. There now exists a decoded message from the American destroyer Ward announcing that it is fired on a Japanese submarine in the harbor. No decisive action is taken, pending confirmation. 0717. An American private using an experimental radar set telephones that he's picked up an unknown flight of 50 planes heading south towards Pearl Harbor. His commanding officer receives the report and disregards it. 0755. The first wave of Japanese planes attacks the American Air Corps to prevent a counterattack. The major strike against the primary target begins. Battleship Row, 8 capital ships, the backbone of the Pacific Fleet. Seven of 8 battleships are sunk or seriously damaged. In 1 hour and 45 minutes, Japan becomes the leading naval power in the Pacific. The Japanese success is beyond their expectations. They do not know how well they have succeeded, for the Hawaiian Islands could have been invaded directly after this attack. Another fact that the Japanese do not know, the attack at Pearl Harbor erases America's debate on isolationism. For the United States of America now speaks with one voice. President Franklin D. Roosevelt says,
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
The American Pacific Fleet destroyed, the Japanese Navy seizes control of the South China Sea, the Sea of Java, and the seas of the East Indies. The Japanese army plunges into Southeast Asia. One after another, supposedly impregnable Allied fortresses fall. The British army surrenders at Singapore. With the fall of Singapore, the Japanese dominate Southeast Asia. The American army surrenders in the Philippines. With the fall of the Philippines, the Japanese control the Central Pacific. The surrender of the American army removes all European and American economic competition from Asia. The Japanese Empire has won the war it set out to fight. The Japanese Empire covers 20 million square miles of the earth. The Japanese military planners estimated 1 year for victory. The conquest has taken only 6 months. Japan has defeated the greatest military and naval powers in the East. Japan is diseased with military success. Of all the Japanese arts and all the Japanese virtues, none seems so high as to be a soldier and die for the emperor. 'These soldiers have beaten the West with the West's own weapons, yet they have won more than territory. They have removed the last doubts as to the superiority of the Japanese arms and the superiority of the official state religion. Six months after Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor, she has attained every goal for which she went to war. It is suggested quietly that Japan offer to negotiate peace with the United States. Japan needs time to digest and organize her empire. She will be the second power in the world if she makes peace now before the American industrial machine can organize a counterattack. But the Japanese military has taken over the religion and the seats of political power. And the Japanese military, sick with victory, finds a reason to continue a war already won. The military now looks not southeast at Asia, but due south at New Guinea and Australia. The Marianas are Japanese. The Philippines are Japanese. The Marshalls are Japanese. The Gilberts are Japanese. Only in New Guinea and the Solomons is there Allied resistance. South of New Guinea is Australia, a continent that can easily absorb Japan's overpopulation. The Japanese push south through the jungles of New Guinea towards Australia. The Japanese soldier is the best jungle fighter in the world, and he has one more shock to deal the Americans, a shock greater than Pearl Harbor. The Americans are in New Guinea with minimal forces. The United States has given absolute priority to the European war. England and Russia must be supplied. France is to be liberated. Only enough materiel is sent to the South Pacific to hold the line. The Australians lead the Americans into the jungle. The American soldier has not been prepared for this kind of fighting. His equipment and his training are for the mild European climate. Suddenly, he must worry about water snakes, mosquitoes, and malaria. The equipment is too heavy and too noisy. No tanks, no artillery pieces, no airplanes can penetrate the screen of the jungle. Up ahead, tied to the top of palm trees, dug in caves, moving quieter than the jungle itself, are the Japanese. Japanese patrol is stopped and surrounded. By all the rules of European warfare, it should surrender. But not one Japanese soldier surrenders. There is no word for surrender in the Japanese military code. They will fight until they are killed. They will kill until they are killed. The Japanese die, but they do not surrender. Before they die, they kill a high number of Allied soldiers. How to fight an enemy who will not surrender. For the American soldier, the Japanese become the most feared and mysterious enemy he has ever faced in any war. It is in New Guinea that the Americans come to the bottom of their war. Civilized man cannot live in the rainforests of New Guinea. 120 inches of rain per year. The moisture breeds trench foot and tropical diseases without name. Fungi grow like moles on the inner ear. Malaria, dengue fever, not enough supplies, and an enemy who dies before he surrenders. In early 1943, there is total censorship in Japan. Only the highest officials know that Japan has suffered her first military reverses. The Americans have won 2 defensive battles at Midway and in the Coral Sea. Australia's been saved from invasion. To the Japanese High Command, these are minor technical defeats. There is no necessity to explain them to the people. For these white boxes, however, some explanation must be made. Each white box contains the ashes of a Japanese soldier, sailor, or airman. The Japanese dead are being returned to the homeland. The militarists tell the wives and mothers, in our struggle against the enemy's industrial resources, we must put our spirits and bodies against American steel. Death is necessary for victory. The General Staff also says, the only thing we fear is that the enemy will not come out to do battle. The Pacific is a Japanese lake through which we can sail with impunity. But time is beginning to work against the Japanese. In the months after Pearl Harbor, the new United States fleet has been built. The industrial might of America has rebuilt a whole navy in less than 2 years. The dominant silhouette of the new fleet is the aircraft carrier. An aircraft carrier is a landing strip moving at 30 knots into the wind. Carrier landings require practice and skill. Flaps down, arresting gear down, power on. Both eyes on the landing signal officer. The technique is to keep the nose high and the tail low so that the tail hook will catch one of the wires stretched across the deck. There's a slot that leads down the center of the deck, and the landing signal officer's job is to see that the plane comes down the groove. Pick up your wing, set it down easy. Cut the power. Out of the groove, waved off. A little high, but within limits. Bad landing. He bounces over the deck wires and hits the barrier that protects the aircraft parked forward. Farther down the deck, the plane directors do a ballet under the propellers of the parking airplanes. Not an inch of deck space can be wasted. Fold the wings. You're home. 1943. The new Pacific Fleet is being ordered into its greatest offensive action to date. In safe waters, fuel oil, aviation gas, and supplies come aboard. The fleet gathers. The ships come from San Francisco, Pearl Harbor, San Diego, Guadalcanal. The new fleet covers 50 square miles of ocean. The fleet moves north. The grand strategy is about to begin. The orders are: attack and invade the first of the islands in the long chain of Japanese-held islands that stretch through the Central Pacific. Is about to begin. Ahead of the fleet, there is another strike force. The light and heavy bombers of the Air Force. Their mission is to cut the Japanese lines of communication and supply. They are to search out the islands ahead of the fleet and destroy at low level the Japanese installations. To protect the low-flying aircraft from being destroyed by their own bombs, the Americans improvised new weapons, fragmentation bombs attached to parachutes, delayed action bombs. Later, the Allies seek out the Japanese merchantmen. For if the Japanese shipping cannot reach the islands, the Imperial soldiers will starve. The Royal Australian Air Force and the light bombers of the American Air Force prefer to attack at masthead height. The Air Corps opens the seas to the north, and the strategic plan in the Pacific is about to begin. The grand strategy begins with a small island, Tarawa. Control of Tarawa means control of the Gilbert Islands. Control of the Gilberts means bomber bases from which the Marshalls can be attacked. Control of the Marshalls means bases from which the Marianas can be invaded. And control of the Marianas means bases from which Japan can be bombed and invaded. This is the Central Pacific pattern, over 4,000 miles and hundreds of islands, and Tarawa will be the first. The fleet is is off Tarawa in strength. The strategy is not to invade every island in every group, nor is it to attack the most strongly defended islands. The strategy is to bypass the Japanese forces and seize bases in each island chain. From these bases, the Japanese on the neighboring islands will be neutralized, and bomber strips will be built to attack the next chain of islands. Some of the landings will be unopposed. But the Japanese are on Tarawa with accurate artillery. At Tarawa, the landing craft run aground in the shallow coral lagoon. Some Marines must wade ashore against Japanese machine gun fire. "72 times on 72 islands, the beach will be gained. At Tarawa, on the first day, the Marines gained the beach, but no more. And not all the men get there. In spite of the naval and air bombardment, the resistance is heavy beyond expectations. The Marines are pinned on the beach. "72 times the Americans will move inland, and 72 times the fight will be decided by flamethrowers and small arms." Over 4,000 miles in the chain of islands that reach from the South Pacific towards Japan, the same pattern is repeated. Over 4,000 miles from the sand and coral of Tarawa to the scrub trees of the Marianas, it is the same. The Japanese resist to the last man. The last man must be killed. Unless he's killed, the last Japanese will come out of his cave at night and kill. There is only one rule. If there is one Japanese on the island, he will fight. He will fight until he dies. The closer the Americans come to Japan, the more casualties they suffer, until finally a mathematical ratio arises. For every 2 Japanese on the island, the Americans will suffer 1 casualty. The ratio becomes as inevitable as death. From Tarawa to the Marianas, the Americans take the islands and take their losses, 300,000 American casualties. mathematics of invading Japan are now apparent. The American Secretary of War estimates that the cost of invading Japan and conquering the home islands will be 1 million American casualties. The Pacific Islands have been taken for one reason, to build airfields. When the Marianas are taken, the pattern is repeated once more. This time there's a difference. The runways are longer, wider. They are built for a new plane. A new airplane, the B-29. Inbound to Tinian, Saipan, Guam, the newly won air bases in the Marianas. Inbound, the highest, fastest, biggest bomber of the war. Inbound to take over the battle. This plane has the longest range of any aircraft built in World War II. It can fly the 3,000-mile round trip from the Marianas to Japan. It bombs from 30,000 feet. It's a weapon of strategic bombardment, and its mission is to end the war by bombing out the industrial heart of Japan. This is what the sacrifice was for. This is why the islands had to be invaded. Now, this precision bomber is within range of the Japanese home islands. This airplane will carry the burden of the war to Japan. This airplane will end World War II. In early 1945, it becomes apparent to the Japanese that the Americans are threatening the invasion of the home islands. A time of desperation is beginning. Some Japanese turn to the sources of their beliefs. Shintoism, Confucianism, Buddhism. Japan has not one religion, but many. These are not medieval Japanese, but modern Shintoists who dress in 14th century costumes and live by the codes of their ancestors. In the 14th century, a group of warriors, the samurai, evolved a code of military behavior called Bushido. One of the rules of Bushido is that in the event of disgrace or defeat, the warrior must commit suicide. Ceremonial suicide is to be judged not as an act of weakness, but as an act of the greatest moral strength. The 14th century code of the samurai was convenient for the modern Japanese military to adopt. When modern Japan succeeded feudal Japan, all codes, military and civil, Shintoist and Buddhist, merged into one, the worship of the emperor as a divinity. In 1945, the emperor is still considered divine. He is the symbol of the state and the throne of the state religion. For all practical purposes, the military has seized political and religious power. Japan's army is patterned strongly after the German army. However, it will fight to the death. The more fanatic of the militarists begin to introduce a new idea, not only to fight to the death, but to use suicide as a weapon. But Japan is not completely militarized. The centuries, the religions, the past and the future are too mixed. The contradictory strains are becoming apparent. Old isolationist Japan mingles with modern expansionist Japan. Japan wears two costumes, progress and isolation. Japan has become the most industrialized nation of the East, the fourth industrial power of the world. Its old war machine runs on an industrial base. Yet Japan takes no great pride in her armaments. The Japanese spokesman says, the weapons of war are nothing more than the extension of the medieval samurai sword. To the Americans, however, the industrial complex is the core of the Japanese war effort. The Americans believe that if the strategic industries of Japan are bombed out, the empire, without the weapons of war, must surrender. Day after day, the American fighter plane sweeps over the southern islands. It is with their heavy bombers, the B-29s, that the Americans try to repeat the pattern of the European war. Daylight, high-altitude, precision bombardment, directed solely against industrial targets. But the American bases are too far away. The weather makes sustained bombardment difficult. And at 30,000 feet, the winds are far stronger than over Europe. Additionally, Japanese industry is not as centralized. Japan's industries are often housed in wooden buildings. Firefighting equipment is inadequate. The country seems vulnerable to incendiary raids. The attacks against the Japanese aircraft industry are only moderately successful. Although some damage is done, the Japanese war machine is not seriously hurt. The Japanese Minister of War writes, "Inadequacy of strength is not our worry. Why should we worry about that which is only material?" The few American planes which are shot down are not frightening to the Japanese. Instead, they are symbols of American cowardice. They carry too many guns. They carry too many weapons of defense. These massive American bombers are loaded with precautions and safety devices. The Americans do not understand that this is a struggle between life or death. There is no middle ground, such as safety or surrender. It is evident from these crashed planes that the Americans have an overwhelming material superiority. It is also clear that a strong spiritual weapon will be needed to hold off the Americans' advantages. Thus, the Japanese reach into their medieval past and tie an old concept to modern weapons. The youngest of the Japanese pilots are asked to commit controlled suicide. It is explained to the young airmen that if they dive into the enemy planes and ships, the weak American spirit will be broken. The United States cannot stand the heavy losses which suiciders alone will inflict on them. All those who commit suicide will preserve order, defeat anarchy, defend the emperor, advance 2 military ranks, and above all, will have an assured place in the temple of Japanese warriors. Some pilots will go out with less than 1 total day of flying experience. All that is necessary is to know how to control the plane and how to dive into the American planes and ships. They are taught only the rudiments of evasive tactics. The divine weapon is ready, the contradictory weapon. The weapon of suicide to preserve order stands waiting on Japanese airfields. On the American airfields, the new B-29s also stand waiting. The Americans now know that their plan of daylight, high-altitude bombardment cannot succeed. A radical military change is ordered. All armament, all weight-consuming defensive measures are to be taken out of the planes. All these things which make the B-29 a high-altitude bomber are to be removed. B-29s are ordered to attack not by daylight, but by night. Not with high explosives, but with incendiary bombs. Not at 30,000 feet, but at 7,000 feet. The B-29s were not built to meet any of these specifications. Nevertheless, they will go out. Japanese night defenses are weak. They rely on sound detectors and searchlights rather than radar. There are almost no night flying interceptors, and their anti-aircraft artillery is inaccurate. Japanese cities are built of wood. They are fire traps. March 9, 1945. The worst fire in the history of the world consumes Tokyo. In one night, 1 million people are burned out of their homes. In one night, more people are killed than the atomic bomb will kill at Hiroshima. Night after night, the B-29s burn out Japan, Tokyo, Kobe, Osaka, Nagoya. The Japanese cities, one by one, go up in smoke. The whole nation is on the edge of panic. There is no defense against the fire raids. Secretly, without informing the military, certain influential Japanese begin to discuss amongst themselves the means to arrange an armistice. The Minister of Home Affairs says there is no defense against these raids. To the Japanese, it is the end of the world. Ending, then suicide. If the Japanese military cannot admit the possibility of surrender, and if the accepted means of defense are inadequate, then suicide. Each pilot is given his ceremonial scarf. On this headband are written the symbols of Bushido. The suicide pilots are called Kamikaze, the divine wind that blows the fleet of the enemy away from the shores of Japan. Kamikaze fly to death in a Western-style aircraft, 5 years behind the times. The Kamikaze fly to death in a massed attack against the American fleet now less than 400 miles from the home island. The United States Navy is off Okinawa, supporting the invasion of the island. These ships are within range of the Kamikaze. Radar has picked up large formations of Japanese planes. The fleet reinforces its combat air patrols. The Japanese divide their forces. Their best pilots are to engage the American combat patrols. Once the American planes are engaged, the suicide pilots will crash into the American fleet. Japanese pilots are no longer a match for the Americans. Evident that the American planes cannot knock down all the Japanese fighters. The Kamikaze concentrate on the American aircraft carriers. The American aircraft carrier, backbone of the fleet, is the prime target. If the aircraft carriers are knocked out, the American fighters will have no place to land. If enough aircraft carriers are knocked out, the invasion of Okinawa will fail. Battle of Okinawa continues. For 82 days, the American fleet fights to hold its position. 1,900 Japanese pilots choose deliberately to die, and in their death frenzy, they wound the American fleet. 10,000 American sailors are wounded or killed by the suicide attacks. Okinawa cost the American Navy more lives than any battle of the war. 164 ships sunk or damaged. 8 aircraft carriers are struck. And the Japanese had 5,000 kamikaze pilots in reserve. With the carriers wounded, the combat air patrols must land as best they can, where they can. struck back. The 14th century code of the samurai, Bushido and Kamikaze, has pierced the Americans' 20th century defenses. What will it cost to invade and conquer Japan in the face of 5,000 kamikaze and an army that will not surrender? The estimate is 1 million American casualties. In Japan, as the crisis sharpens, the military recruits a home guard for a suicidal defense against the inevitable invasion. The war party uses the success of the kamikaze as an example to the whole country, particularly to the youth. Japanese fanatics, the case is not hopeless. Let the Americans invade. No battle in history will be bloodier. If the American casualties are high, the Japanese terms will be even better. On the home islands, there are 2 million well-equipped first-line troops. Perhaps the war cannot be won, but suicide will win favorable peace terms. Yet the nation has been bombed out and burned out. Malnutrition, typhoid, and pneumonia are sweeping the country. The nation does not want to kill itself. Thus, the Japanese diplomats secretly asked Russia, Sweden, and Switzerland to arrange peace. The Japanese military fanatics vow they will kill any government official who discusses peace. Honor dictates that until the emperor speaks, Japan will continue to resist. On July 7, 1945, the Emperor of Japan personally requests that the war be ended as soon as possible. His language is vague, and the military does not choose to interpret it as a command to surrender, but as a command to win the war. Tinian, a bomber base in the Mariana Islands. 400 heavy bombers are continuing the air offensive. By day, the bombers are armed with high explosive and incendiary bombs. Until the invasion begins, these planes will continue their attacks. On one corner of the island, a special group of planes, the 509th Bomb Group. The planes of the 509th have been radically changed on the interior. There is nothing externally different about this bomb group, but it is sealed off from the rest of the Air Force. The 509th is not sent into the mass formations that bomb Japan daily. The group is ordered to fly a few missions to Japan, but never with the rest of the Air Force. The 509th flies only minor missions, and its formations never number over 6 planes. The planes are armed with high explosives, and they sometimes carry a single 10,000-pound bomb of a peculiar shape. Only one man of the group knows what lies ahead. The 509th suffers no casualties, and its few missions cause only negligible damage. August 6, 1945. The 509th Bomb Group has a major mission. The first atomic bomb is placed in the bomb bay of an American B-29. The bomb is extremely heavy. On a previous night, 4 B-29s carrying an almost equal weight have crashed on takeoff. If the plane crashes on takeoff, there is some danger that the atomic bomb will explode and kill everything on the island of Tinian. Thus, the bomb is put into the bomb bays, disassembled. After takeoff, the technician charged with arming the atomic weapon climbs into the bay and begins to reassemble the bomb. Since the plane is to maintain strict radio silence, there will be no way of knowing until the bomb is dropped whether or not the weapon has been fused properly. Hiroshima, headquarters of the Japanese Army. The city has previously suffered only light bombardment. Bombardier is not to bomb by radar. The city must be visible to the bombardier's eye. The weather over Hiroshima, clear. The bomb run lasts exactly 4 minutes, 8:11 to 8:15, Hiroshima time. A city of 350,000, dead 80,000, wounded 80,000. At first, the Japanese do not know what has hit them. They can see that most wounds come from blast and heat. Japanese do not understand the symptoms of radiation sickness. The plane has carried a bomb equal to that of more than 2,000 bombers carrying conventional weapons. One plane has dropped a bomb equal to 20,000 tons of TNT. After Hiroshima, the Americans will not lose 1 million men in an invasion of Japan. After Hiroshima, Japanese fanaticism will crumble. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the emperor will demand that Japan be surrendered. The war has ended, but mankind has found its own suicide weapon.